The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, Tech Bites is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
Rob Grimes with Tech Bites and another episode, and actually a repeat offender. Today we have Danny Klein, who's the VP of Editorial and Director of Food, Retail, and Hospitality at QSR and FSR magazine. So welcome back to Tech Bites.
Glad to be here, as last time.
Well, you know, I find that whenever we get together, there's an interesting conversation, and you have a lot of different things going on. But you have something coming up that actually the IFBTA's Lauren Selman is involved in, which is Women in Restaurant Leadership, otherwise known as WiRL. And that's coming up in Nashville in just a few weeks. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, we're recording on February 5th, so it'll be here in 14 days or something like that. February 19th and 20th. This is the second year we've been doing it. It's grown exponentially, which is great. Actually, this year, of all the events that I've been a part of, this is the first one to ever fully sell out. You know, we've kind of sold out things in the past with quotations around it where you went over capacity, but you can still, you know, let people in. We've literally gotten to a point now where we can't let anyone in because we don't have enough chairs in the area where you eat lunch. So we're afraid of a scenario where you would go to the buffet, you get your food, and you'd have truly nowhere to sit down. So we had a closed registration 2 weeks ago, which we've never done before. So we sold out about 43 days in advance. So it's been an amazing experience to watch this grow from year 1 to 2. You know, I hoped for that to happen. I think there was reason to believe it might, but to actually see it occur, it's been just
well,
really
it's obviously
crazy.
it struck a chord as something very important in the industry. And as we know, there are a number of different organizations within the industry, including the one that Lauren and Tammy Billings and Crystal Craven helped to found. But they're with Women of Restaurants, Technology, and Hospitality, otherwise known as Worth. But they're going to be talking about Know Your Worth and as a session. And I know they appreciate, you know, being invited as a group as well to participate. But you're really bringing all the different groups together. So in your second year, totally, you know, sold out, which is great. Do you have a theme?
So the way that I would describe the theme, I mean, I broke it up into 3 separate themes, which I can't reel off on the top of my head right now. But basically, the idea in year 1, we had a lot of workshop programming, which was this vision that we came up with, and we split the room in half. You went to one workshop, and then you went to the other, and it was cool and it had its moments, but you know, it was actually kind of stressful on the people leading the workshops because they had to do them back to back twice in a row. But this year we changed that up pretty significantly. So now we have 3 tracks. You know, one of them is kind of around running your business, the other is around this idea of growing your career, and then the third is around just kind of the empowerment, you know, of being a woman in the industry. And that's the one that Worth is slotting into at the end. It's actually only one of 2 sessions to come back year 1 to year 2, just based on the feedback and how much people wanted it to return. So a sign there that Lauren did a great job.
I recognize that you and I may not, you know, represent, you know, the participating audience, you know, or the ones, you know, that the conference is centered around. We certainly could participate, but how do you actually come up with what are the right subjects and what is the issues and challenges that need to be faced this year or right now versus last year? Or, you know, how do you come up with that?
Yeah, so our board is 40 people, which is a lot of people, and it's a lot to wrangle, and it's a lot of opinions to collect and to try to kind of hear out and react to. But in year 2, that 40-person board, you know, we did meetings after the event. So we took that plus the survey, and they really created the agenda. So I didn't come up with anything that you're going to see over there. Everything that was on the agenda for year 2 was created by somebody on the board. And then Satine, who's our associate editor of WiRL, who we hired to come on full time after the first year's conference, has been kind of curating and talking to all the board members and wrangling those thoughts and beliefs. So everything in there was requested by someone within the industry. So we have a track on financial acumen planning. So that was requested by somebody who said, I just really want to learn from, women in the industry, how to know your numbers, how to get into the, boardroom and understand what you're looking at. So we've got something on that. Then we've got a track on marketing, because we had a very, very large, marketing contingent of operators last year, including a session on marketing and then one also on how to become a CMO. How do you rise up to get to that point? We have something on how to become a CEO. We have a technology track, which is, learning.
Near and dear to our heart.
Yeah. So that one is about, that was also requested. And essentially the idea is, how as a, woman in tech do you, break into the industry and grow? And so all these different things that we're doing, including Worth, all came from that group of people, that 40 group board that we
from the magazines and your digital, online presence. Do you track certain things all year long with this particular group?
Yeah, so that's been a thing too. It's been helpful. So last year we launched the conference in 5 months. We had no separate media concept for it, and this year we have a whole separate division for WiRL at this point. It lives within QSR and FSR as a vertical, but it has its own social media. It has a department in each magazine. It has its own podcast. It has its own webinar series. So that audience development has been just critical and probably very much largely responsible for, the sellout that we mentioned before, because we've been developing this very ongoing group of engaged people who come to the webinars or come to the social media, and we keep track of that. We see what they respond to. We have certain webinars that perform better than others. So we have a lot more information on this movement that we did this time last year, when we were kind of just figuring out what in the world we were doing. But
so is there a scorecard of sorts that sort of keeps track on the improvements and the growth within the industry? For instance, women as CEOs or CMOs or CIOs, the C-suite. Is there like a scorecard on that sort of tracks the growth in that, or the percentages? And
yeah, we have been trying to track that. It's kind of tough because, a lot of times you think you know who works everywhere and you don't. And then you get reached out by someone and you're like, oh, there's another, female CEO that I was unaware of. So we do keep a kind of a ongoing, list of those people, just so that we have a sense of A, how much it's growing, B, who are these people, and are they, operators and leaders who want to come speak to our audience, or who we can get involved. And so we have this kind of ongoing, like if you look at our social media, it's almost like a mixture of information and a kudos board. But, that was something I think that is important. I've kind of posted at times like, hey, now we've had 3 CEO, women appointments in 4 days, and, get comments along the lines of like, at what point in time does that not become news? And I totally understand that reality, but for right now, it still is.
so what are the challenges? I mean, not just the topics that you guys are going to cover, but from an editorial standpoint, or looking at the scorecard for as much as you can track, are there certain trends or challenges out there that that you guys are seeing that really need to be addressed? Maybe they aren't being addressed, or you believe maybe the key talk about things, at this year's conference that may or may not have been officially on the agenda?
Yeah, I mean, we ran a survey ahead of time of everyone who's attending, asking them some questions around some pay scale gap things, and how the challenges they've had in either getting promoted or different parts of their career. And it really returned a lot of super interesting and somewhat disturbing results. And that's actually going to be part of Lauren's Worth session, is revealing some of that information of how much they feel they're getting underpaid, or what stopped them from maybe getting a promotion, or the conversations that they have in certain aspects of their careers, and the challenges and ways that they can solve it. So I'm interested to see how that goes. Just kind of looking at last year, To me, I found that conference to be one of a kind in the respect that the education and the programming and all of that part of it was great. And like I said, we amplified it extensively this year over year. But really, what it was about was the creation of a space to allow them to talk to each other, to allow them to recruit from one another. I mean, there were a lot of people that went there in search of different jobs. We've had people within WiRL hire each other. I've got a call not too long ago from the CMO of Red Lobster who just wanted to let me know that she
Right.
got that job from WiRL, which is a really, crazy thing to hear. And so yeah,
It's so
it's
funny
different
though.
like this though,
It's really funny. You would think with all of the industry conferences and get-togethers and networks and associations and all those different pieces, this is such an important aspect. And when I think about, the women leaders and the mentors to me, okay, that are women leaders over the years and stuff, you would think that this would have been done, right? And yet you're really striking a chord in an area of need, and it's about the people that participate, and also it's all areas of women in our industry, whether they're on the supplier side, the operator side, it's really all of them.
Yeah, I get asked that question sometimes. I was kind of ignorant to what else was out there. So it's not as though I kind of understood the landscape and went and offered something different. I really just reacted to something that people were asking us to do directly based off a networking hour that we had at our other conference in Atlanta. And then it just took on a life of its own. But what I think it did do that maybe wasn't out there was provide sort of this more organic, like networking opportunity that was very accessible. So we thought about that.
Because it wasn't as structured.
Yeah, not super structured. One day, a day and a half if you want to come do a pedal bike tour. But, you can come in and out quick. We kept the price really low. So what you ended up happening was that a lot of the women who attended WiRL last year, and I guess we'll find out this year too, didn't really look at like getting corporate approval. They just like sent and paid for themselves as like a
I was going to
invest in
ask
their
that
careers.
question, that how many people get sent by their companies where they have the company support, and how many people, decide to go on their own, including those that want to, take the initiative to find their next career and what, or their next job and what they're doing, and they see the value on their own. I think that's a great measurement.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way for me to really know the answer to that question, but I do know that both things happen, and it seems as though the second thing of people sending themselves happens um, a lot more than our other conference. I hear it all the time, but in terms of like splitting it down, whatever the percentage is, I would have to ask every single person, which maybe I'll do this year. I guess we'll see, but there definitely seems to be a large contingent of industry leaders who do that, which I think is responsible for kind of what we have as like a very diverse group that comes across the corporate ladder. So we have what I would say is like a lot of second to fourth stage career people. We do have CEOs, but we also have someone who's like,
People who are emerging.
yeah, so we have a lot of like emerging leaders who are meeting each other versus like every restaurant's top executive coming down to be a thought leadership model, which is sort of how our QSR Evolution event, you would say, mostly works because on the speaker side, but this is really everybody. And I think
But
that's
do
why
we
it's important.
differentiate in the participants and attendees? I mean, obviously, with any conference or any publication in media, you've got sponsors, of it. But on the other hand, many people that are with those sponsors would qualify as a industry leader as well, and people do make the jump from supplier side to operator side. So how do you work that in?
Yeah, so I'll say one thing that's unique about this event too is the vendor sponsor side, in addition to the speaker side, those people come to this event and stay for the whole event, and they participate in all aspects of the event. Versus a lot of conferences, the speakers kind of speak
Absolutely.
and leave kind of thing. This is like one giant conglomerate of people. It was really interesting last year, like in the situations of the welcome receptions and the after parties, and then like even what happened after the event, it just had a very different feel to it. But to the sponsor side, it's something we're trying to kind of understand, because they come, but there's not a ton of like hard selling at this event. So having a booth is
It's relationships.
yeah, right. So having a booth is important and people want it, but they also want to go into every single session. So we tried to have some more flexible, interesting packages. Like this year we're doing a sponsored Barbie party, with Olo, where they're coming in and kind of, versus like just kind of having like a table. They have this whole Barbie party theme that they're running. And in addition to that, it's just we have this quiz the board partner roundtable that we added this
I
year.
saw that.
So we didn't do that in year one, and again, it was a request from a few people. So if you are a sponsor, you can join one of those. It's just kind of part of being there. So you can come sit at the table with 3 or 4 board members or whatever it might be and speak to the audience in an intimate setting of thought leadership versus.
Well, I was looking at the list of sponsors that are at the event, and like many events these days, a large percentage, if not majority, are technology companies.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't
Really
necessarily mean that they have some technology they have some specific offerings for women in leadership positions in there, but they're supporting the event, yet they have women executives and leaders within their organizations.
Correct. Yeah, it's
And so
super
that's
interesting.
really the question, right? One thing is support, but the other is actually participating as much as anybody else. We're all in the industry, right?
Correct. So yeah, that's something evolving for us that we're trying to figure out versus again like our other event. So that's the roundtables was part of that. The technology panel that we're having is all quote unquote vendors. So you have Olo and Sparkfly and Restaurant 365. They're all on that panel. And again, it's not like your typical, you might say sponsored panel that is a certain way at a certain conference, because in this case they're all there together, right? So it's not like,
and they're not necessarily talking about their technology, they're
no,
talking about women who are working in tech. So
right,
I sort
well,
of get that.
right, and they're sharing the stage with each other versus their
Right.
quote unquote clients or whatever it might be at some similar.
Well, I've done technology panels before, but usually it's people debating what the hot technology is, or where the industry. This is different because it's not about that. It's about the careers that are in there and the growth.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be so those who came last year, I mean, we've had a lot of feedback again about like having more participatory like sponsorship opportunities, and not because of like they just want to get their technology on stage. It is, to your point, like they just want to be part of the conversation. So I know that we'll change into year 3. We're still kind of.
But you're going to start on year 3 right after this is over, right?
Yeah, I mean, we already have the the venue contract and all that signed, so you can't really take a break.
Where's year 3 going to be?
Yeah, so year 3 is going to be in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
great restaurant town.
Yeah, so it was never meant. WiRL was never meant to stay in Nashville forever, similar to how like QSR Evolution is meant to stay in Atlanta forever, which it will. This was always meant to kind of bounce around to fun restaurant cities. I put it in.
Yeah, by the way, since you brought it up, because you've said now Evolution twice. So Evolution is it's the other one that you're doing, right? And that's in August, September?
September, yeah. So I'm deep into that process right now, so I apologize. It's just that I'm basically we're in like this week rush to get the website created. So I've been doing that every day so far this week. It's just and that thing, is just a bear because it's so big and there's so many speakers, and so getting everybody.
But you also have a reception for WiRL there too,
right? So that's where it all began. That's
right.
That's what happened, was that we were going to do a women in restaurant leadership panel at QSR Evolution. And when I was doing my reach out to brands and kind of saying like, here's a list of topics, what do you want to speak on? Everyone wanted to speak on that panel. And, I felt bad telling them no, because it was such a good topic. Like you would say, oh, our CEO wants to be on this. And I'm like, I have too many people, sorry. And so I went from having a panel to having this networking reception. kind of figuring I could put like 50 people in it, maybe.
Yeah, some people weren't able to get in there,
Right.
even if they had people that were on that
Yeah. Well,
on that piece. But
that's
we
what
get
happened.
that.
I mean, that was the origin story, because all the people who couldn't get in and all the people who kind of complained about one thing or the other, several weeks later when I was doing my 2024 planning, I, versus like creating something that I didn't know anything about, I was like, well, look at this thing. This was really popular. I have a feeling I could spin this into a separate event, and I'll go and
And so you do that.
right. So I'll go and I'll ask the same people who complained to me to help form this board. And that's where it began. So create this separate space.
So
How
you
many people?
spend a lot of time online, because I've seen, LinkedIn postings, and I've seen, podcasts and videos, because you do a lot of those during the course of the year. How do you continue that conversation for World? Because you said that they're sort of a community of their own, and you've got, I guess, a digital piece of it and sharing and things. But how do you, like? It's not just a 1.5 days, right?
Yeah. So that began by hiring Satine. So at that moment in time, I realized I couldn't do that. It was just not feasible for me to give it the attention it deserved. And, honestly, I mean, just candidly, optically, needed a woman to be that person, not me. I'm happy playing the role that I do, and how we got here, but I just wasn't the type of person that should have those conversations in the right way.
Right.
So she was an intern of ours and had been here for over a year, and really couldn't find a place to hire her, honestly, because as much as I wanted to, QSR and FSR just didn't have any openings. We're successful, so they didn't want to add positions. They didn't see a reason for it. So I had to create this kind of like statement for World to say, like, this is what it could bring in, this is what the cost will be, and all these things I had never done in my career because I'm an editor. I'm not making like EBITDA statements. But I created this case for World to be a separate vertical within our larger media company. And they approved it, and it gave me the opportunity to hire Satine to do this on a full year basis. So once that moment came and we had expanded capacity, we launched the social media, we launched a media kit. We have departments in every magazine now, QSR and FSR dedicated to it. We're going to have full issues dedicated to it this year and going forward into the future. And so, yeah, I mean, the basic idea there is that it just doesn't stop now. So she writes
Right.
articles on women in the industry that we run digitally, every week, probably 2, 3, 4 times.
But she's got to have her finger on the pulse there, and
Right.
really be in touch and really be part of that community day in and day out.
And that's exactly what she does. She meets with the board pretty often, way more often than I was. And that's one of the things I told her I wanted her to do, because I knew how much insight was there, and I just didn't have the time to go tap it.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, she lives and breathes this mission, and she spends, her days figuring it out. We launched an e-letter for it about a month ago that comes out every Wednesday. And she's just constantly commenting on people's posts on LinkedIn or connecting with them, or she's just doing I would say an incredible job, but she's doing the job I knew, honestly, she would. So
Well,
it's been good to not be
so
wrong, for sure.
so clearly, it's a growing conference. There's a need. People participate. It's not just 1.5 days. It's all year long. You guys have made the investment in that and in that community. So you have 40 people on the board
40 people on the board.
and speakers this year. How many speakers do you have?
I think it's in the 40s. Don't quote me on that, but
But I think so too. I didn't count, but it looked like it.
so it's 3 sessions happening at once, 3 different times. So again, last year it
Right.
was just 2 at a time. So each one of those has 4 to 6 speakers. So yeah, it's whatever that is.
So it's a lot of participants, and how many attendees do you typically get because you're sold out?
Right. So fun. So it's a good question. So year one we had 300 people. it was, and I say this line all the time, but it was 296 women and 4 men, including myself. So year two, we're over 500. It's kind of funny because I was told about 2 months ago to not go over 425 people. I didn't listen, I guess. So so we're at like 500 and ish. I haven't checked it this morning. It's but again, it's not accepting registrations anymore. What I didn't quite count well in my brain was like the amount of sponsor attendees who hadn't yet registered.
Absolutely.
So as they started to
Right.
register, the number kept going up, and I was like, "Oh, well."
Well, it's a balance thing, but also there are also participants. So
Yeah, and so it's like I say, I went way over my number. I don't apologize for it. I think it's going to be a scene out there. It's going to be great. And to point to, I mean, 500 to me in my brain, that's the cap. I do not want to grow it beyond that. So even next year, the venue sits the same size. I just think if I got too big, it would not
well, you
be
start
what
to
it
lose
is.
the intimacy,
Right.
of it. But it is something that you can break into groups, and you can partner with people like the IFBTA, which you are doing, in certain areas on this, because there's different focus groups, so it's not all the heavy lifting, necessarily on yourself, but there's a lot of offshoots and there's a lot of opportunities, and it's also generational, as you've already pointed out, between different levels and different needs. So
Mhm.
I expect that we'll probably see that expansion as we go. I did want to ask you, do you include Maggie in your attendees? Does she get to go?
So she was in the Barbie video that we launched as a introduction to the Barbie party recently, and Lauren was in that as well. Where when we were doing the marketing ahead of that, we had everyone kind of record like a hi Barbie thing. But Maggie was in that video, so she is kind of an honorary member of this organization in my brain, at least.
Well, she probably participates and gives a bunch of different ideas
Yeah,
that are out there today.
motivation.
So, but I did follow that on LinkedIn. I thought that was very good to
Yeah.
see that posting out there, and I figured maybe she gets included. So
I
that's the
wish I
answer
could.
to
I
that.
wish I could bring her. But she actually hates traveling and probably would not like to be in a room of 500 people, even though they would all be doting on her.
They'd
So
all get the attention, though, right?
yeah, she
So
she would be quite popular.
there you go. Well, listen, just as a reminder, Nashville, the 19th to 20th. I guess I'm telling you this, but
You can't
it's
come.
sold out,
Right.
right? You can't come. So I got to think about that for a minute. But I think what would be really good to do would be to do a follow up afterwards, perhaps not with you, but maybe some of your board members, just to talk about what the hot pieces that came out of it, especially as it relates to technology. Maybe I shouldn't even do it. Maybe I should just let Lauren do it. That would be interesting. And, really talk about, at least on leadership and women's roles in the technology space, both from the operator side, because that is our focus in there. But it's going to be a great conference, and we really appreciate your including, the IFBTA as a supporter, and then also Worth, represented by Lauren and her partners in that, to be able to speak.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Lauren was one of the first people I ever told this idea to. So her support throughout the process has been um, just invaluable. And that's the Satine will always talk about this. I mean, we have a very unique challenge with WiRL that I have not had that issue in any other media at my point of life, which is really we are just trying to figure out what to do with all the interest. We have not had
You got to let it go where it goes,
right,
right?
exactly. So we have
Because
not
you
had to
really
seek
can't predict it.
right. We haven't had to seek it, so we haven't had to curate it all that much. So really all we've been doing is trying to harness it. So like we're coming up with products that are direct relations and what you mentioned before, all those conversations are happening, whether they're regional meetups or
Right.
virtual meetups or even maybe doing a second version of this in the summer. We've had all those conversations. And in all of them,
Summer camp.
Right. And interest has not, that's the thing, is like interest hasn't been the issue. So engagement and getting people to come do these things is the hardest thing in 90% of what you do in media. And with WiRL, it has not been the hardest thing. And just understanding that kind of dichotomy has challenged us to think about it differently. And it's a really wonderful problem to have. And it's honestly sometimes gives me life because so many things are so challenging on a daily basis. And to have so many people want to be involved here organizationally, like you all, to, brands and vendors, it's been crazy. And we're going to
Well, I
figure
think it's a
it
good
out.
thing. Anytime that you can have the community leading the way, you're providing the platform and the voice, out there that they can leverage and do. And that's great that, you support, but really the life of it and where it goes from here is really up to the industry itself. And you both come together to bring a very important part and obviously needed by its growth and its focus to the industry. And you do it together.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been a lot of fun. I mean, yeah, it's sometimes a lot, and you're trying to, the criticisms and the critiques, you hear them all the time, but you always have to remember, especially with conferences, they always come from a place of they want to be involved, so you have to filter some of it through remembering that this is towards something greater. And yeah, we could
Absolutely.
get better. We could do this better. We're not going to do it perfectly. There's so many events in this industry, as you know. They've been around for decades. We're in year 2 here, so we're working on it.
Well,
So,
it's all about the community and what you're doing for the community and bringing it forward and giving that platform. And, you know, you may be only 4 or 5 men in the room,
more.
but
There are more this year. There's probably, I haven't counted it, but I would say it's 25-ish this year. So there's
well, everybody's got to work together, in this, but it is a very important piece. So, Uh, I would urge everybody to follow along. I'm sure there'll be editorial coming out of this, and then engagement, as you said, all year long. And even if you can't make it out this year to Nashville on the 19th to 20th, you can be engaged, and you can be engaged both with WiRL and WiRL's subset of FSR, QSR. And I'm sure if you reach out to Danny and his team, they will certainly direct you because they've got a specialized group that's focused on it. So, Danny, I want to thank you for joining me again
you're
on
welcome.
here for this conversation
Always a
and for
pleasure.
including us. So, we will look forward to the follow on and reading about things online and seeing how it goes.
Yeah, no, excited. And, if you go to register right now and you see that it's sold out, which you would, there is also a waiting list that you could enter your name on. And if it's not for this event, which, if I'm being honest, it probably isn't going to be because the waiting list is 75 people, um, it is giving you first priority to the Women in Restaurant Leadership Networking Hour in Atlanta. So we're going to
There you
send
go.
that first out
So
to
there is a
them.
benefit either way. And there's
Yeah.
a long time between now and Atlanta, too. So I'm sure there are things that they
Yeah,
can
it
get involved in
feels
between
like
that.
it, but it also,
Ben, you're going to have that website up by the end of the week, right?
yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
By the time this airs, it will be up. So, anyway, well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your support of the industry and allowing us to participate and allowing Lauren to participate representing the IFPTA as well. So,
Of
it's
course.
been great speaking with you today.
You too.
This podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFPTA is the industry's voice of food service, hospitality, and retail technology, providing thought leadership as your single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFPTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, the exchange, an all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. The bottom line is the IFPTA is your place to gather, learn, and share in conversations like the one we're having today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Tech Bites, powered by the IFPTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.